everybody to our first tax conference committee. Madam Chair and Senators, first of all, I want to thank you all for your hard work in Senate tax this year. We've had an interesting year as far as bills coming out of committee, but what happens to them after that. So I do want to recognize that you've done fine work over there in Senate tax, and I appreciate all your hard work. As chair and vice chair and ranking member, I believe you guys have done some excellent work over there, as the House has tried to also work through our tax policy and the different things that we have. Currently, we have House Bill 2239 and House Bill 2597, I believe, in conference. We also do have 2106 and what's the last one? Do you remember?
2416, I believe you were appointed, but I'm not sure the Senate has received their appointments.
Okay, yeah, that one I don't think is actually in conference yet. It had some judiciary pieces in it. I think it was announced today that conferees were changed in the House, but for right now, I think we'll focus on 2239 and 2597, and I would look towards Amelia with the revisor's office to kind of start us off here and kind of let us know what those provisions were in those different bills.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a preference on which one you would prefer that I begin with?
My preference is your preference. 2597 might be the easiest one to start with, but.
Okay. I will start with House Bill number 2597, and actually maybe working backwards from the current version, which is the Senate substitute for House Bill 2597, so you can get a concept of where we are right now. This was an act concerning property taxation. If you begin at new section 1 would provide a new property tax exemption for antique utility trailers. New section 2 would allow for the proration of certain personal property, which is listed in the other category, the other subclass, to be prorated, the taxation be prorated. Section 3 would amend 791476, which relates to land devoted to agricultural use. And one of the provisions would provide that the classification for land devoted to agricultural use that is subject to the Federal Grassland Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP grasslands, be classified as grassland for purposes of property tax valuations. It would also make a modification to the definition of land devoted to agricultural use, so that such land devoted to agricultural use would include land utilized by zoos and would also allow incidental agritourism activities. Sections 4 and 5, well, Section 4 would amend 792930 to provide that budgets need to be provided to the Director of Accounts and Reports on or before December 31st each year, beginning this year in 2022. And Section 5 would amend 792988, which some of you might recall as, I believe, Senate Bill 13 from last year. Some of you may still be referring to it that way. It is now 792988. And there are some modifications to the statute in this bill, notably providing for a roll call vote and providing some publication of budget forms and revenue neutral rate forms. It also provides a revenue neutral rate complaint process whereby a taxpayer of the taxing subdivision that is subject to the complaint or such taxpayer's duly authorized representative may file a complaint with the State Board of Tax Appeals. There are some provisions related to the county clerk and the revenue neutral rate, and then also the Department of Administration would have some reporting requirements to publish documentation that they receive from the county clerks and from the taxing subdivisions on their website. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Could you just go briefly over section 4 again? I think I miswrote my note down here.
Yes, section 4 is a statute 792930 that relates to the county clerks. And it essentially, the existing statute has to do with budget information being filed with the county clerk, so taxing subdivisions filing their budgets with the county clerk, and then the county clerk turning around and also providing copies of those to the Director of Accounts and Reports within the Department of Administration. And so what this provision, what the proposed amendment would do is simply put a deadline on the filing with the Director of Accounts and Reports that it happened by the end of the year. The requirement that it be filed is already there. It would only add the deadline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would tell you that the last provision that she spoke of, December, the Division of Accounting and Reports was in my office in 2021 and actually asked for that language. So we thought we'd try to help them out, and it did pass the Senate. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would thank you for your kind words, too, in the beginning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you feel comfortable briefly kind of going over like the antique trailers and some of the information that's just items that we didn't see in the House committee? Not saying we disagree with them. They sound like good ideas, so I didn't know if you were comfortable at this time, maybe just quickly briefing us on those provisions?
Absolutely, I'd be glad to. The antique trailer establishes a 30-year trailer or older under, I think it's 2,000-pound weight, could be established as an antique trailer. And the zoo, maybe I should have Amelia. I can go over all these if you want, but Amelia, would you mind? Well, I'll just tell you. And then the zoo one, what happened is we have a zoo in Kansas that is being classified commercial. And we just wanted clarification that for zoo, it's animals and mainly ag-related. So we're just clarifying the classification on that land. The grassland CRP, there was a federal program change, and the language that is in statute for Kansas, it is being interpreted so that that grassland is the highest grassland. There's different levels of grass, as you know, wet, dry. This mainly impacts western Kansas, and this would just establish that we would continue valuing the CRP grassland as we have been previously. The other provision of this was the property tax proportion, meaning if you have items such as personal property, golf carts, ATVs that you pay property tax on, if you sell that in the middle of the year, then you would be prorated for that year. You wouldn't have to pay for the entire year on property tax. And the revenue neutral rate was, we were increasing a reporting requirement. There's a website, ks.gov.org, and they requested, did open records request and posted all of that information. And I thought instead of relying on a nonprofit, it just makes sense for the state to have that information posted and sent to the state. We also clarify the appeals process for anybody that doesn't agree with the property tax. With the revenue neutral rate code that we put in last year, we put BODA would be the place that handles those appeals.
And Amelia, if I might ask you for some clarification, I'm just not familiar with the zoos very well. As I was reading through the bill, it looks like there's a Class C license. So this wouldn't apply to all zoos. It would just be certain. I was just unfamiliar with what a Class C license entailed. Not to put you on the spot, but.
Mr. Chairman. I also am not that familiar with the Class C exhibitor license, but I believe there was testimony in hearing from one of the conferees that the zoos have, that the zoos do have this Class C exhibitor license.
Yes, and I think Eddie might be able to, oh, JG, actually. Okay.
Thank you. The information that's provided in the hearing is that Class C is when they're exhibiting animals. The other classes, and that's a United States Department of Agriculture classification, are breeding, animal breeding operations, or the other classes. That the zoo that provided testimony was in that circumstance, that when they switched from being a purely breeding operation to an exhibiting operation, that's when it became a Class C license.
So this would apply to all exhibiting zoos?
That is my understanding of what the Class C license is. It's zoos that are exhibiting animals.
Okay.
Should we ask how many there are in the state of Kansas? I know the fiscal note was negligible, but yeah.
The fiscal note provided information that indicated there are 29 Kansas properties holding Class C exhibitor licenses. 19 of those are currently exempt from property tax. For some other reason, largely municipal zoos would also hold Class C licenses. And so there would be 10 properties that would be impacted by this provision throughout the state.
Thank you. That's very helpful. You answered the question that I didn't know how to ask, so. Madam Chair, I think at this point, I have discussed the contents of 2597. I think we like the provisions in 2597, and I would like to make another offer. At this time, the House Tax Committee passed out House Bill 2724, which was, I called it the 20 mil trigger on regarding the revenue neutral rate, the notification requirement. The main thing that we didn't want to do is have that statutory 20 mils that local school boards, they can't change, it's in statute. I didn't want that to be the only thing that would trigger them to have the requirement to do the notifications and have the hearing and all the pieces there. And I'll accept full responsibility. Last year when I put that in, I thought it was statutory, so I didn't think it was a local tax levy. Revisers informed me that it was indeed subject to that rule, so just trying to clean that up. That's what 2724 would be. There's also another House bill. It is 2618. It is a property tax exemption for a business incubator program. This bill actually didn't go through tax. It was vetted in the House Financial Institutions and Rural Development Committee. It actually has probably a positive fiscal note because it takes abandoned government properties, buildings, allows them to lease to a new business that's wanting to start up, lease it to them for 5 years without being on the property tax rolls. And then after the 5 years, the business maintains the lease and it does come back on the property tax rolls. So it's a way to utilize, the reason it's a rural development program is rural communities, there might be some properties out there that could be utilized and get them back on the tax rolls, get them back to being functional buildings. So we wanted to make that request to see if that was something the Senate would be willing to take a look at.
Would that be all you'd like to add to it?
At this point, I think that covers for 2597. If we're going to keep bills kind of in silos, I think that's the best way to be effective here, and that would be all the property tax items at this point.
Okay, we'd like to consider those, not accept them at this time, if that's fine with you. And I would like to counter at this time for your consideration. If you would, putting in, trying to pull it up, the property tax bill that would the 20 mil, increasing it from 20,000 to 65,000. If you would,
Exemption.
yes.
Anything else, Madam Chair?
Yes, if you would, I would also, actually, I think that's it. Oh, no, Mr. Chairman, we did have one other we were considering, and this is a heavy ask, but I would like you to consider it. We had legislation last year that would have reimbursed properties that were shut down during COVID. It got pulled the last day of session during conference committee. We had agreed on it, but for some reason, the Senate pulled their own position. I don't know why, but we also passed that language in 2416, the Senate did this year. So if you would be willing to take a look at that, we would appreciate that also.
Certainly, that was going to be my question. I knew we had 2416 that might be coming to tax, so I wanted to make sure you're offering what is currently in 2416.
Actually, we'd like to make a couple, yes, we are offering that. What passed the Senate committee, 2416.
Just
Just the
tax
property tax portion.
Okay, not
The reimbursement on the property tax. Yes. I'm sure you might have some counters on that, but at least if you would take a look at that, that would be great. Thank you. I think that's all that we had.
okay.
Okay. Okay.
I think I'll turn to the reviser and ask him to go on to 2239 unless
Yes,
we have anything else on 2597.
Right, if we're under the understanding that we'll come back to that later and
Certainly.
not sign off on anything. I think we're fully in agreement on the contents that were in it, and then we'll talk about the two that you offered and the two that we offered additional, if that would be okay.
Perfect. That's my understanding.
Wonderful. I just want to be clear. Thank you.
Amelia?
Mr. Chairman, Senate substitute for House Bill number 2239 is an act concerning income taxation. The bill, as it came out of the Senate Committee on Assessment and Taxation, includes the establishment of the Golden Years Homestead Property Freeze Act. And just as a reminder, this House bill, the Senate substitute for House Bill 2239 was I believe, from last session. So during the committee, the dates, the applicable dates for the Golden Years Homestead Property Tax Freeze Act were modified so that it would be prospective and not retroactive. There was also a modification, there was also an amendment in committee on, with respect to that act relating to, if I see it here, relating to the base year and the maximum value of the homestead. I believe now it reads that the valuation limit applies to the base year value only. Yes, I believe that's in new section 16. Beginning with new section 19 are provisions relating to what is called or established as the Salt Parity Act. That would allow pass-through entities to elect to pay state income taxes at the entity level. This has to do with the limitation on individuals' state and local taxation caps that the federal tax code put into place. New section, sorry. Yes, new section 25 would establish a checkoff for contributions to the Kansas Historical Site Fund. This would allow individual taxpayers to make contributions through their income tax return to the state historical sites or museums. Section 26 also relates to the Salt Parity Act, as does Section 27, also are amendments related to the Salt Parity Act. Section 28 includes a subtraction modification that allows the carry forward of certain net operating losses for individuals. This relates to a provision in the CARES Act that allowed a carryback for certain net operating losses. And this provision, instead of it does not allow a carryback, but it establishes that that carryback amount may be carried forward on the Kansas income tax return. Section 29 increases the Kansas standard deduction beginning in tax year 2023. From the current, I believe it is a 10% increase over the current standard deduction. Oh, shoot. Nope, I did not. Player retention, yes. Sorry. If we go back to the modification statute that has addition and subtraction modifications, there is also a provision that allows a subtraction modification, that adds a subtraction modification for the federal work opportunity tax credit and employee retention credit disallowance. I believe it's added to subsection C10. There's also, if anyone is following along, there is some language in there that is just a technical cleanup to, there were a couple, we had two versions of this particular statute, 7932-117, passed last year. So if you see the language in here about the first-time homebuyer savings accounts, additions and subtraction modifications, that is, what do we call it? A reconciliation of the two statutes. It is not new law, it is existing law. We're simply merging the two statutes so we have one again. And then there is also a provision relating to net operating losses and allowing, this is in section 31, allowing a net operating loss that's incurred from the sale of at a loss of a historic hotel with certain conditions for tax year 2006. And then section 32 amends 7932-261, which is a tax credit provision that would provide a tax credit for contributions to community colleges or technical colleges for capital improvements, deferred maintenance, or the purchase of technology or equipment. This would begin July 1, 2020, with contributions beginning July 1, 2022. It would be applicable for tax years 22 through 26. There were some modifications to I can't remember the House bill. I believe this was from a House bill, 2315, and so there were some modifications to the proposed language relating, so it is slightly different than what was in 2315. The annual limits for an individual taxpayer, I believe, is a $500,000 credit, a $500,000 credit for an individual college, and then the overall annual tax credit allowed would be I think it was, I'm sorry, I'm back on the original bill. The provisions in this bill are, I believe the limits are 1 million per taxpayer, 1 million per college, and 7 million for the total tax credit. And I believe another difference in the language here is that the tax credit would be not refundable. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. The other change was it is a 60%, the tax credit is 60% of the contributions, not 100% of the contribution.
Thank you for that. That was a marathon to explain. I did have just a couple of clarification questions back on section 19 when we're talking about the salt parity. Did I hear you correctly in saying that is elective? It's not mandatory that the business do this? Each business can choose which way they want to handle that?
Yes, it would be an election by the entity.
Okay. And then on section 25, the historic site checkoff program, and Madam Chair, maybe you could answer this easy too. What does it take to become a historic site? Is that already designated, or would museums and historical associations have to apply for something?
This would apply to all state-owned historic sites administered by the Kansas State Historical Society. So they would be those established, that meet that parameter.
Okay, so my little museum in my hometown would not qualify. Okay. Also, is that a dollar for dollar? It's a checkoff program. Does the state keep any of that for administrative costs? It's strictly a turn it around dollar for dollar to those locations?
Yes, there is no provision here for any costs. It would be to the historic site.
Okay. Madam Chair, is there anything you'd like to add on 2239? We don't have any further questions. If
You're asking me, there's a lot I'd like to add.
Okay.
Did you want to take a closer look at that?
I think we do. There's a lot of things in here that I really like, and maybe a few that not so much, but we'll take a look at this. I'm not sure we're prepared to make an offer on this quite yet.
Okay, there are, I guess we'll wait till we hear what your offer is, but there are some things we'd like to look at.
And I'm open to some discussion now if you
Okay.
have time. I'm not sure what time the Senate goes back in, if you're at recess or.
Actually, we're supposed to be in caucus right now, and then on the floor at 4. So, but tax is a priority. I've always made it, as such. Are you guys okay with that? Okay. Okay. We have had a bill that's come up during session. I know you guys are aware of it. There seems to be some controversy in Atchison County, and as a result, Senate Bill 87, where we were asking it to be across all counties. We would ask that you consider the Atchison County portion, and that you also consider language that when there is a county sales tax or any sales tax, that it is clear on the ballot as to who will receive that sales tax that's being passed.
Yes, and we did have a House bill. We introduced that language and had a hearing on it, so the House Tax Committee was very familiar with that issue. I think there was actually a hearing on it a couple of years ago as well. But yeah, that's certainly something we'd be happy to consider and take a look at.
That would be great if you would look at that. I know we had some legislation on back to school sales tax holiday, if you'd want to take a look at that. I would also, Wilson County, we passed that separately in a separate bill. We would ask that you would consider putting that language in.
Okay.
Okay. And the Senate also took a look at removing sales tax for electric, gas, and other utilities for commercial in order to level the playing field. Homeowners do not pay for that sales tax currently. And I know a few years ago, before I was tax chairman, they tried to put that on homeowners, and it didn't, there was no movement on it, thankfully.
That wasn't popular?
Yeah, no, that was not popular, thankfully. So I'm thinking we go the other way to level the playing field, if you would take a look at that for consideration. Did you have anything else that you'd like to?
Yeah, are you wanting to talk about sales tax right now? Okay, yes. And I think this goes without saying, obviously, I think the wildfire fencing needs to be a priority when considering our sales tax issues. I also know that you passed a bill out of committee and actually across your chamber. It's Senate Bill 327. That's the one we would like to also make a request to put that in. I think that was a fairly nominal fiscal impact. I think it's creates some parity and some fairness to sales tax on delivery charges, shipping and handling. You mentioned Wilson County. We also had one in the House tax regarding the city of Latham. It was kind of an unfortunate situation. In years past, we've had some counties and cities that have passed without the statutory authority. They were actually within their statutory authority. They did everything right. They got everything in place, and the newspaper didn't get it printed on time. They missed it by one day. It's a weekly newspaper, small town, and by the time they ran it the second week, they missed the deadline, the statutory deadline, by one day. Small community, we didn't want them to go to the expense of having another election, so we'd ask that you consider that. We also had a House bill. I apologize to staff, I should be giving you the numbers. The Latham City bill was 2682, and the House Tax Committee also approved House Bill 2732. It has to do with Gage Park Improvement Authority. It's another local sales tax. This is a little bit different because it actually establishes this new tax authority, and then they will be able to put on the ballot to the citizens of Shawnee County whether or not they want to approve a sales tax for that entity alone.
We'll be glad to take a look at that, Mr. Chairman. I will tell you there is some heartburn on our side as to creating another taxing authority, especially with over 4,000 taxing authorities in the state of Kansas right now. The word that I got was if we are going to look at that, would you consider removing some taxing authorities? So,
Certainly willing to take a look at that.
okay, that would be
I
great.
know we have quite a number of sales tax authorities, and
Okay.
it's quite expansive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was there anything else that you'd like to see in it?
I think at this time that covers, there are a few other things, but I think at this time that's the large ones that we're looking at.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, thank you for my ranking, reminding me, we do have several items we'd like to include in. We passed Senate Bill 282 that had quite a few sales tax items in it. We would consider that you take the entirety, the package of 282 in its entirety.
Okay.
We haven't got to income tax. He's setting me off here. I need to stay on target. 282 is income tax, and so we have not got to the income tax bill. We're just on sales tax at this point. We are doing 2239, which we are going to keep it as a sales tax bill. We will deal with income tax in another bill. Okay, so if I may, 2020 282 was income tax. So we'll deal with that when we get to it, if you'll consider it.
Okay, so the entire contents, I think that had like some housing pieces in it, and if 282 was
You'll just take a look at most of it.
certainly, yes.
But we will deal with that with income tax.
And house tax did have a chance to hold a hearing on that. I know that's one of the bills that you passed across to us, so we did have a chance to take
Take a look at
in
it.
detail
Oh,
on
that's
it.
wonderful. Okay. So that's all I know for sales tax. I know this is just an initial. We'll come back if we missed anything.
Certainly.
Okay, great. And we do have another vehicle for 2106 for income tax.
Okay,
Would that be okay?
yes.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and talk about some of our income tax proposals? I'm open to that right now if you wish.
You're up for it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the contents in 282, or do you just want to, what would you like to do, Mr. Chairman?
I think that would be easiest. I don't have 282 pulled up here.
Okay.
Or do you want to just,
You know what, we could break, this is quite a bit to digest, and then why don't we come back and talk income tax after that? Would that be okay?
you're on the floor at 4?
Yes.
Okay, we are as well.
Okay,
Do you want to
wonderful.
plan on 5:30? I'm not sure what all business items we have at 4 o'clock, if we have some concurs, but
If we could, hold on just a second. Mr. Chairman, this is a pretty big lift. We would like a little bit of time to digest this and take a look at the income tax bill, if you're okay with that.
certainly.
Okay, thank you. If you wanted, we could try to meet later this evening, otherwise, first thing in the morning.
Madam Chair, what do you feel would be an adequate time if you wanted to meet yet this evening? I want to make sure you're comfortable having time to take a look at some of the,
I would say after 8:30 PM. Is that too late?
I think it's general consensus, we'd rather go first thing in the morning.
Thank you. We would just like to do our homework and make sure, I know this is a lot of moving parts for tax, as it always is, and I appreciate your diligence in allowing us the opportunity to take a close look at it. What time tomorrow morning? As early as you would like, we will be here.
Does 8 o'clock work for you?
My vice chair said 7 AM is better, but if you would prefer 8 AM, that would be fine.
I'm a farm kid, I can do 5 if you want to.
Me too.
I sent my ranking a text message at 4 o'clock this morning, I think, but
It's be careful what you ask for, right? Let's plan on 8 AM in this room.
yes, that'd be
Okay,
fine.
okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.